Relationship between the United States of America and Pakistan has been like a roller coaster ride, many ups and unfortunately many downs. And currently we are passing through a phase in which we are rapidly tumbling towards an era what we euphemistically call as trust deficit. But somebody or some same elements have got to check this, because as the former US Secretary of Defense Robert Gates once mentioned about the deteriorating relations between Pakistan and India, he likened it to a bad marriage. But of course, he put in the rider clause that divorce is not an option. But to discuss how to check this downward slide and how to improve the relationship between Pakistan and the United States of America, two very important allies, we are honored to have in our studio today none else than Dr. Cameron Munter, who is not only the ambassador of the United States to Islamabad, but we would like to look upon him as a friend of Pakistan and a well-wisher. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
And of course, we have with us Dr. Simbal Khan, who needs no introduction because she's a very familiar face, at least on my programs.
Thank you.
So, Your Excellency, just to start the discussion, how do you feel about this relationship and what can be done to check the downward slide?
Well, let me make 2 points. And first of all, thanks so much for this opportunity. It's great to be with friends, to be able to talk about these really important issues. And that's the first real point I want to make. We must talk about them. One of the difficulties that's happened in the last 6 months, but indeed over the last months and years, is that we have had difficulties that have driven us apart. And the only way to solve them is to address them together. Whether or not these are security issues, where our military has to talk with each other, intelligence issues, where our intelligence chief have to talk to each other, and even more important, where our civilians, whether they're social contacts or governmental contacts, we have to keep talking. So that's one point. The second point I'd like to make is that even though it's characterized as a downhill slide, even though there's this picture of that, let's not forget what the basis is of our relationship and how solid that relationship is. And I'm talking about social, society to society, people to people links. Let's not forget the number of Pakistanis who have relatives in the United States, who work in the United States. Let's not forget the number of businesses on both sides. The greatest trade partner, both ways for Pakistan, is the United States. Let's not forget the number of students we have, the largest program in the world. We send more students that we pay for from the government from Pakistan to the United States than from any other country in the world. And what I want to see is that trend also, that we bring more students here, more teachers here, more engineers here, more people to work with you. That basis is still solid. And I think that what will happen, no matter what we discuss about the politics of the day, we will still have that basis, and that's what we got to remember we can build on.
But the problem, Your Excellency, comes in, admitted, America has been one of the biggest benefactors, and Simbal, you will agree with me, I suppose, towards the Pakistani society. And especially it has been there during our moments of need, notwithstanding the 1965 and 71 wars, they are past history, but in the recent past, we had the 2005 earthquake, we had the 2010 deluge, we had the 2011 floods in Sindh, and the Americans were the first to reach there. But I recall a comment by Richard Holbrooke, of all the people, who said that we were the first and we have given you the maximum, but where are your other friends, the traditional friends like Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and China? So that sort of, picked the sentiments of the people. So how do you see that? You do so much for us, but let us not try and sink it in.
I think you make a good point. What we need to do is we need to change what I would call a narrative about the United States. And I don't know, Simbal, if you have some comments on this as well, but there is a narrative in Pakistan about the United States. And that narrative is, look, the Americans are arrogant. They come in here, they tell us what to do. They push us around. And that narrative is very deep, and it's based on the idea of his history. Similarly, there's a narrative in the United States about Pakistan, that Pakistan says one thing and does another. This, to me, is intellectual laziness. And what we fall into, and I'm afraid in the news, even among the diplomats, we use these stereotypes. That's not the way to solve problems, because if you judge these things by the idea, this is how Americans are, this is our discussion, or if Americans say, these are the Pakistanis, you can't trust them or something, we're not getting down to the real issues. So your point is absolutely right. We should get rid of these kinds of stereotypes and start addressing the issues as they stand. Your energy problems, what can we do together to help them? Your region, how can we have security with and a future in Afghanistan? How can we help you make peace with your neighbors all around you, India? How can we work with your friends, the Chinese, where we have a common interest in seeing a stable region? How can we get to the real issues rather than dealing in stereotypes?
Right.
I'd like to pick on what the ambassador talked about, especially on the issue of narrative. I think he's absolutely correct. There is a given narrative in both the countries, and we usually stick to this script for the past 10 years. But one thing very important to remember, that this time around, this last decade of very intense partnership around, this narrative has been completely shaped by the war in Afghanistan. It's not a bilateral narrative anymore. It's always been this trilateral narrative, and it's been basically shaped by what's happened in Afghanistan, the various phases of the war in Afghanistan, and it continues to do so. This is the issue that came up even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when this whole Kerry-Lugar bill, when the US started talking about broadening its relationship with Pakistan, going towards a civilian increasing the civilian component of this relationship. Even that time, a lot of people, both sides got up and said, hey, this partnership is basically based on the war. There is no broad partnership. It's a narrow transactional relationship, this time focused on the war in Afghanistan. I, of course, have been of a different opinion. I see a long kind of an enduring history of this relationship, and for whatever reasons, whether they're transactional, short, geopolitical reasons, there is an enduring history, and I don't think those reasons, even if they are geopolitical, have disappeared or are going to be completely put aside because of the war in Afghanistan. But the reality is that this narrative is being shaped by the war in Afghanistan. There are serious issues. The ambassador talked about the energy, the people-to-people relationship, the educational relationship. But the fact of the matter is, because of the US's military presence in Afghanistan, because of the US's large military involvement in Afghanistan, which continues to this date, of course we are going to see a kind of a shift over to a different kind of involvement in Afghanistan as we move towards 2014.
But you see...
but just
okay,
if I can
okay,
just
okay.
round up my
argument.
This war, the way it's being fought, the problems that we see in our bilateral relationship have more to do with differences over strategy and the war strategy, and also the counterterrorism strategy that the US is following, not just in Afghanistan, but also on the bordering areas in Pakistan.
How would you respond to that?
I think there's much truth in what you say. I think that what we have is a common task, and the common task is the enemy that threatens us both. But, as you've said, we can't let that be something that defines the relationship entirely. There has to be a balance, and we have to seek that balance from the long-term commitment that we have through the Kerry-Lugar-Berman legislation, as an example, $7.5 billion pledged by our authorizers to contribute to the long-term stability of Pakistan. At the same time, that we have to work on the immediate challenge of the security, so that your shrines won't be bombed, etc.
But just a second, sir, before you go ahead, about the Kerry-Lugar bill also, there have been a lot of myths, and some of these myths and shibboleths were created perhaps by people with tunnel vision, and it was people in Pakistan were led to believe that this is against the interest of Pakistan. Would you like to sort of set the record straight here?
Well, since I don't believe it's against Pakistan, it's hard for me to argue that case. But I think what we need to be able to understand about Kerry-Lugar-Berman is that assistance is not the answer, it contributes. It's something that's supposed to contribute to the leadership that Pakistan shows towards its long-term goals. That is, if Pakistan wants a strong educational system, if Pakistan wants to create a public health system, Pakistan takes the lead. This is a demonstration that the Americans, and I hope our friends from other countries, will follow. So that was at least what our intent was. But I come back to your point that we have to have a balance, and I think in the public debate there has not been a proper balance between our commitment and the commitment of our friends to your long-term security and the commitment we have, which is very real, to fighting the common enemies that we have that are against an open society, a tolerant society like we all need to see here in Pakistan.
Yes, I absolutely agree about common causes that we have to fight. But I think the main problem that has stemmed over Afghanistan and over counterterrorism is that Pakistan is actually facing a blowback from Afghanistan, from the war in Afghanistan. Hence, there are definite very, very strong reservations about certain strategies pursued in Afghanistan by not just the US, by NATO and the other partners, international partners in Afghanistan, and how they are likely to impact Pakistan, are impacting Pakistan today, but also going forward. There is no clarity about 2014. There is absolutely, the transition is being talked about, and when I follow a lot about what happens and how the discussions and how the narratives are moving forward in Washington DC, I don't really see any clarity on what is the end game, how does it all end in 2014. There is more, from the Pakistani point of view, there is more a kind of a rush to the door, rather than seeing forward, moving forward, how it's going to impact the security in the region, not just the security inside Afghanistan, but Pakistan's security. So I think, just going back to a very important issue, what the problems that we are seeing in our bilateral relationship, last 7 months of this standoff over Salalah, for me, in certain ways, have taken the focus away from the core issues that we should have needed to have discussed in these 7 months. We have focused on events, and we have not focused, because for me, as an analyst who's been following the region, I think our relations had nosedived before Salalah. There were serious issues between us before Salalah, and I think Salalah has taken the attention off on a very sad incident that has happened, a very unfortunate incident where Pakistani soldiers lost their lives, and the whole Pakistani nation, and of course the US also got involved in trying to deal with that. But I think we haven't really dealt with really serious issues of coordination of our policies going forward, which needs to happen.
It's absolutely true. And if I could make one comment, on October 20th of last year, we had an unusual and very productive meeting with Hillary Clinton coming to meet with Hina Rabbani Carr. At the same meeting, David Petraeus meeting with General Pasha, and Martin Dempsey, our chief of the staff of the Joint Staffs, meeting with General Kiani. All of them together, coming up with precisely the agenda that you're talking about the American concern about the Haqqanis, who are killing our soldiers as well as killing your people, the Pakistani concern about long-term relations in the region, the vision for the end of Afghanistan, etc. How do we deal with these things? And you're absolutely right that tragically, the incident in Salalah ended this conversation, which was moving in the right direction. And what I see yesterday's meeting in Rawalpindi between General Allen and General Kiani, I see it as a good start to rebuilding these kinds of discussions, precisely the ones you need, not limited only to security, but certainly taking into account the importance of these security issues and building up that level of working across these issues, because I couldn't agree with you more. The greatest tragedy of the last 6 months is that we haven't dealt with the issues. We have simply seen this problem become the thing that blocks our discussion. So I'm absolutely in agreement with you.
No, but the problem, you see, and if I may give my 2 cents worth, although in your august presence I shouldn't be.
Oh, it's your show.
Well, what I would like to say here, sir, is that the stance taken by the government of Pakistan in the aftermath of the Salalah incident, I personally believe, and I think so would our viewers, that Pakistan took a correct stance because our feelings were badly hurt. But after that, policies and strategies need to be revised. And my 2 cents worth is that we have probably prolonged this far too long, and we have not tried to modify it. And as you rightly pointed out, that they have become stumbling blocks. But in the bargain, in the United States, it is the perception, and unfortunately it is not the truth, but the perception which carries the day is that Pakistan is part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Absolutely, Hali Sahab, if I could just come in, I completely agree with you. And even this last 7 months, I think you and myself and a lot of other analysts, and I can only speak for the analyst community, we've been on your show and other programs, and we've discussed this. And there is no kind of a single opinion on this issue, not about how wrong and how bad Salalah was, and it's been a tragedy. Not on that, but how to handle the fallout of that. There is no single opinion in Pakistan. The government, the political government, took a certain stance, took a certain policy. They have every right to, pursue policies in there. But there's been a massive criticism also. And I was one of them who felt that after the initial closure of the G-lock, there's a certain time, and we shouldn't really kind of box ourselves out on that. And as we've talked about with the ambassador also, that there are very important issues that need to be discussed which impact Pakistan's future security more than just just this one narrow issue of Salalah, and we should have moved forward. I'm definitely with you on that, that, you know, there is no unanimity of opinion and we should have handled it differently. But saying that, there is huge issues with communication, and the fact is that in DC, when you look at how the narratives are proceeding in DC, we also have to understand the politics there. And there is so much investment in the war in Afghanistan. A lot of people who talk about Pakistan in DC are basically Afghan hands. They've been going back and forth from Afghanistan. They stop in Islamabad for a day or two to be hosted by the ambassador, and they, you know, they're taken out for a dinner here and there. But most of their experience, most of their view of Pakistan is colored by their experience in Afghanistan, 10-year war experience in Afghanistan. Hence, it's a very warped kind of a view of Pakistan that comes out there. And then, as I agree with you, the view is that Pakistan is a spoiler. It's Pakistan, everything wrong is happening in Afghanistan because of Pakistan. And the policymakers in DC find it also expedient to use the Pakistan's, you know, kind of case as a fall guy. Pakistan becomes a convenient fall guy for a lot that is wrong in Afghanistan.
Perhaps the ambassador would have a slightly different view, because you contribute to the view from Washington. Although, I mean, I tend to agree, because the view from Washington, the perception would be totally different. And once you are on the ground over here, the ground realities tend to sink in. And I believe you have been a proponent for patience in Washington, patience in Islamabad. How do you see a way forward, sir?
Well, one of the things that's very important is to take into account the importance of Afghanistan. There's no doubt. And when you talk about this, you wisely say that we should not have a distorted vision. The question I say to myself then is, what do we do about this? How do we make sure that the policy, as those of us who want to see the strength of our relationship and the achievement of our goals in this region, how do we get the Pakistani government, the Pakistani people, the institutions here to contribute to fighting that image of Pakistan as the spoiler? When you have 50 countries that are fighting a war in Afghanistan, and they perceive that the country that is their ally is blocking their supplies, the conclusion they draw is that the country that is supposed to be their ally is on the side of the people they are fighting. We know that's not the case. We know your government is committed to the fight against the militants. We know your soldiers are dying on the border, thousands of them. So there's a contradiction, and one thing that we have urged the Pakistani side is to take into account, yes, there are the domestic issues, important, every country has domestic issues, but there is an isolation growing for Pakistan, that the perception is Pakistan is on the side of the people who want to defeat the coalition. So I am urging Pakistan to do what it can to reach out and say, Pakistan is more than that. Pakistan is not only an ally, Pakistan has to live in this country, in this region, after 2014. The decisions that are made now by the Pakistani government are the decisions that Pakistan is going to live with, and a positive Pakistani contribution to relations to the future of Afghanistan. Not always waiting to see what the American plan is. Let's see the Pakistani plan. We applaud the long-term vision that we see, that the opening is taking place to India, that there's strategic ideas here. You have smart people. I think what we need to do is, those of us who are friends of Pakistan, help Pakistan communicate those ideas to people who have seen Pakistani actions very skeptically. And it has isolated Pakistan, there's no doubt.
Yeah. Would you like to add something to that? Because you know, you've been mentioning Afghanistan, and you're a specialist on Afghanistan. The last time Pakistan and USA were allies when the Soviet Union was occupying Afghanistan, and of course together we helped, you know, not only repel them but got them the independence that they so much desired. But unfortunately, after that, the United States walked away and we were left holding the baby. But this time around, Hillary Clinton and the other wiser people in Washington are cognizant of the mistakes of that era, and they are very clear that it shouldn't be repeated. So what the ambassador just said is right, but with this, you know, slide in our relationship, do you think that is going to happen?
Just to kind of, first I'll just respond to some of the things that the ambassador said. The ambassador talked about the narrative, you know, again referring to the narrative that Pakistan is seen as a spoiler. But another thing you said, that Pakistan is seen as somebody who's trying to defeat the coalition inside Afghanistan. I take objection to this, not just the idea, but to the language. Again, we come down to narrative. For Pakistan, I think we feel that it is unfortunately this crafting of the language on winning and losing and war and peace has gone on too long. I think the way to put our policies forward, to put our speech acts forward, is to say that how is Pakistan contributing for the peace and stability in Afghanistan? How does the international community contribute to the peace and stability, long-term peace and stability of Afghanistan? Once you start looking at Pakistan's role in that context, once you start looking at Pakistan's speech acts, official speech acts in that context, I will quote our foreign minister, our prime minister, where they have constantly said that Pakistan is ready to go out on a limb to establish long-term peace and stability inside Afghanistan, because it is to do with our own peace and stability. So right. I object to the language of winning and losing. It's not a war. It's about regional peace and stability. It's about peace and stability in Afghanistan.
But Simbal, you and I may object. The important thing is, what do we do? Because this is a perception. That's what I'm trying to explain, that there is a perception that has been formed and it has hardened. It is no longer the media. Unfortunately, people in the State Department also use this kind of jargon. So yes, we have to do something to shed this.
I agree with you 100% on this, that the perception is very much there. But we must understand also, and people in DC must understand, and people in Islamabad must understand, and it's usually talked about by boring analysts like myself. There is a dynamic. When you say that the things are in a dynamic, when there is a war, especially in Afghanistan, there is a dynamic of change, and especially this moving towards transition is a dynamic of change. We are going to see a constant change on the ground. We don't know if the change is going to be for the better or it's going to be for the worse. But the situation today, where what we are looking at, it is changing very fast, and mostly, unfortunately, the narratives stick to something that was happening or maybe valid 2 years ago, but is no longer valid. I think what the narratives need to do in Pakistan also, not just in DC, in Pakistan, has to get a little bit more up to date with the change dynamic, and it is changing very fast, and the narratives are going to change.
Let's hear your views on this.
No, absolutely. I think that what we can do, people of goodwill in both countries who are really interested in making sure that we see that our common goals, as we all have said, as General Kayani has said, as Hillary Clinton has said, that we are 95% in agreement on where we're going in Afghanistan, a peaceful, stable Afghanistan, a peaceful, stable Pakistan, that we're able to define these things, and you make a very good point, not just today, not, I'm afraid, with the political questions in mind about what is the response, but the longer-term questions of where are we going to be. Let's think after 2014, when the nature of the American and the international presence changes. We're not leaving, but we are changing our presence. You'll see a different face of the United States in this region. I'm actually optimistic that we are making progress in Afghanistan again in the security front, but what I really want to see, and I believe you do as well, is the rise of investment, the rise of international cooperation, the rise of addressing the kinds of issues that are the issues of the future. I would suggest, when you say, what can we do about it? Part of the way we can do that is that in our government-to-government contact, that we make way for contact from other people and the leadership of not just bilateral ties, but international ties, multinational links. You have lots of other countries who care about this region, and you have other institutions that care about this region. Let's bring the business community into the talks. Let's bring the academic community into the talks, and try to deal with, I think, the problem we've both identified, which is a kind of a stale narrative, a narrative where we tend to repeat the same things over and over again. True or not, what we feel is that we go in circles.
Right. If you permit, we take a short break,
right?
And then we'll continue. Viewers, we take a very, very short break. Welcome back, viewers. So we were having this discussion about the narrative, but beyond that, the actions which need to be done. And of course, you mentioned that the United States is very much cognizant of Pakistan's problems, and the leading, of course, our economy and not only law and order, but the energy shortage. So you were going to tell us what the United States is contributing to this.
Absolutely. And this is the key, I think, to your point about we have to talk about a broader set of things, which are the real challenges that need to be addressed. Look, everyone on the street tells me that the main challenge in this country is energy. We're committed to a long-term project where what we want to do is follow the leadership of reform in this country and to not only add megawatts to the grid, whether we through our support and our strong support of the Dimer-Basha Dam project and other hydroelectric projects, but the refurbishment of the turbines and the dams like Starbella that we built in the 1970s to make sure that you have the physical infrastructure. But also, this can't answer the question. We can't fix the energy problem here. We need to see Pakistani leadership for reform to clean up the kinds of issues that make it difficult, the wastage that you have. If you talk to anybody in the government, they will say, you have the capacity to put away the energy shortage tomorrow. But it's going to take some tough decisions. So that's one thing. We want to see Pakistani leadership, and we want to be there to support you. One of the means by which we want to do this is not just through bilateral aid. Our goal is actually to stop assistance. Because what I've learned since I've been here over the last 2 years is assistance builds a relationship that's not a relationship of partners. It reinforces inequality. We don't want that. We want to be partners with Pakistan, the way we're partners with countries like Turkey or South Korea, where we used to have robust aid programs. Now we're partners with them. That's where we want to go. One way to get there is not to rely on on bilateral aid, but to use organizations like the Friends of Democratic Pakistan, which is a group of people that were formed, the Friends of Democratic Pakistan, to support the democratic institutions here and reform, following Pakistani leadership in reforming the country, but addressing precisely things like energy. There's a great energy study that the FODP has written. I have to say that many of its recommendations have not yet been taken, but let's hope they will be, and we'll keep suggesting that. We can expand that. Energy, water, education, health. We're engaged bilaterally, but we understand we can't solve the problems. We can only contribute to your solutions.
You see, what the ambassador said makes a lot of sense. But there is a dichotomy as far as energy is concerned, because you see, we also are suffering from an acute gas shortage. And we have just entered into 2 agreements, one with Iran, and the other which is commonly known as TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and sorry, India and Pakistan. But the Americans somehow, I mean, we get this feeling over here, are not too happy with our getting into an agreement with Iran.
I think they're quite vocal about, any kind of, not just the gas pipeline, but any other kind of project, any kind of a development or infrastructure project with Iran at this point. It's not just Pakistan specific, any other country, and they're trying to impress upon some of their partners to reduce the ones who have a lot of, at least energy trade with Iran, like India, South Korea and others, to reduce their dependence on Iranian oil imports. So it's a policy that's being used around the world with American allies on Iran. But the point is, and I think why things get even more complicated here, is that Pakistan at this point is suffering really, really tremendously with the energy shortage. And I have followed TAPI since in the 90s when, this came out with it was a Unicol-led deal and, a project that was put on the...
Yeah, when a consortium was there.
Consortium was there, and I've been following it, and I've also followed the Iranian thing. In the end, of course, it'll be good if we had both, but it'll be far easier to get the Iranian project up and going, running far quicker. The TAPI project has to see multi kind of level agreement